Well, if you've ever seen the film Blade Runner, and it's funny, there's a few films, probably I could put them all in one hand, the films that I've seen on the very first day. I'm one of those people who, when I go to the movies, I tend to go like 2 weeks in. I almost never go like the first weekend. But Blade Runner is a film that I saw the very first day it opened for some reason. That was back in 1982. And I remember the very first image in it. And what it is you are floating over a futuristic Los Angeles. It is pitch black. It's not even overcast. It looks like night. And flames are belching from derricks, oil derricks, which are in the middle of the city, drilling for derricks, gas derricks, oil derricks. I guess they're gas derricks drilling for fuel right in the middle of the city in this overbuilt, freakishly hyper-urban landscape. And what it is that you're actually in a flying car. You don't realize that at first because the image is you just floating forward. But I'll never forget, in 1982, that opening image of Blade Runner. And, of course, could never forget the rest of the movie with its immense megalopolises. And, as I said, flying cars and replicants and a truly freakish kind of almost like city as hell design. Well, a lot of that was the work of the incredible director Ridley Scott, but a lot of it was also the work of visual futurist Sid Mead. Sid Mead has become a legendary designer in all kinds of products, from homeware to the looks of films to graphic design and advertising. He's an immense and legendary talent. When I see his work, I think of a lot of the ads. I was born in the early 60s, so I remember seeing my dad's copies of National Geographic, which always seemed to have these ads in there for this futuristic, super clean, super technologized world that we would one day inhabit courtesy of U.S. Steel. I didn't know those words back then or what U.S. Steel was, but I remember the pictures. I remember how happy, clean, rich everyone looked and how futuristic the cars and houses were. Didn't know who Sid Mead was, but I know these images. It was much, much later in life that I learned what he had done and how much he had done to create this kind of new visual language for talking about commerce, technology, and the future of humans. And, of course, it all came together when I saw Blade Runner. That was my experience. But maybe for you it was seeing Aliens, another one of my favorite films, or the film Tron. Well, Sid Mead is the subject of a documentary titled Visual Futurist, and we have the director of the documentary on the line with us. His name is Joaquin Montalvan, and he's here to tell us about this film and why he created it. Joaquin Montalvan, welcome to Nonfiction and to WBAI.
It's great to be here.
What is this film about?
It basically covers the career of Sid Mead from start to when it was finished, which is about '05. So I wanted to do in a film essentially what you might do in a book, which is cover a man's career. The man happens to still be alive, thank God, but I wanted to capture the whole oeuvre from beginning to end. And I think the film does a good job of doing that, from his early beginnings up to the film work, which was, most of it was the big heydays of the 80s, where there was a term that Paul Salmon likes to use called designer cinema, where you'd have a Mead putting his signature on a film. That kind of has changed, and he's still extremely active in film work. But you get subcontracted out, and the name gets buried. But in the 80s, the name was there.
Sid Mead, I always knew, or I've always thought of him as the guy you go to when you want something that looks like hard, first of all, hard in the technological sense, something that looks like fearsome in a way, and something that will look like it would actually work.
Yeah, that's his big thing, is that and he says in the documentary, he says, when I design something, I draw something, it's never an object on white paper. That object exists in an environment. There's a setting. There's a street. There may be other vehicles. There's buildings. There's architecture. There's people. They're holding things, objects, glasses. They're wearing clothing that brings in fashion. So that's what he brought to all of his work, but primarily in Blade Runner. He didn't just draw the one thing he was asked to do. He drew other things around that object. And Ridley Scott was like, I like that, and he would ask him, let's have you do this, let's have you do that, and as Sid has told me, basically he seduced the process of design, whereby he was just asked to do a car, and now he's being asked to do all these other things, which was not the original intention.
A lot of times, if a designer is asked to draw a car, they just draw the car against a kind of neutral or white background. But when Sid Mead draws a car, when he was asked to draw cars, the spinners, as they were called, the flying cars of Blade Runner, he drew the environment in which the car would naturally be found. And that meant that if we're talking about a futuristic car, he drew an entirely futuristic environment all around it. And it so matched what Ridley Scott wanted to make that they became intensely collaborative in the making that film.
Yeah, and he was brought on board very early on that film, and he worked basically one-on-one with Ridley, and then other people, Larry Paul and other people did things off of that and brought it to 3D life. But it was a one-on-one relationship that they had, which he thought which he found very stimulating.
Why did you make this film?
That's an interesting question. I was actually working on a narrative film called Mobius, which is a kind of a psycho thriller, and I had basically run out of money, and I was at a kind of a down time in the making of that film, and kind of to lick my wounds, so to speak, I would surf eBay for Blade Runner memorabilia, because Blade Runner is my favorite film, so that was my window in. And I came upon a website called Blade Zone, and in there Sid had been interviewed, and in the interview he seemed like a very personable, amicable guy, and at the end of the interview it said Sid Mead, Pasadena, California, and a little light bulb went off in my head, and I said, Pasadena, California, I live in Pasadena. So I Googled Sid Mead, and I came up on his website. I sent him an email on his contact page, which is a page embedded in the site. It's not his personal email, but I sent him an email on his contact page, and again, like, yeah, right, I'm gonna get a call or an email. Well, it just so happened that they were checking their site that morning, and about an hour later, I got an email back from his business manager, Roger Cervic. And then about another hour or two, I got a phone call. And then we met 2 days later, and that was it. And that was back in August of 2004.
Had you said that you wanted to make a film about him? Was that what your email was about, or?
Yeah, I basically said, I love your work. I didn't mention actually even Blade Runner, because I didn't want him to think I was some Blade Runner geek, which I kind of am, but I didn't want to reveal that. So I basically said, I love your work. I think it's made a significant contribution to film history. I don't think it's ever been properly documented, and I'd love to do that. And they liked the idea of it.